You are listening to Unravel with Natalie Denise.
What's up, guys? I'm back. How are you all? What's going on? I see some people already watching. Guys, I've been out for a week. I don't even know how to podcast anymore. Sorry. Okay, I'm going to leave now. Just kidding. But yeah, I've been out for a week. Last week I had a trip abruptly come up to go to the border. And so I did. As you guys know, just like the things going on at the border are just not being reported at all. I am still working on a part 2 to my coverage, but you guys saw in part 1, I was actually traveling out there with Ivory Hecker from, not Project Veritas. She whistle blew through Project Veritas, but she was a Fox 26 reporter that on air pretty much like put them on blast, like, hey, they're censoring me, and she like took an exit out. But no, not banned. Thought you got banned for a minute. No. I'm here. I promise. I just took a trip. I did post a notice on my Instagram, but I don't know how many people follow me on Instagram that watch me on my other platforms. But hey, Patriot Voice, Patriot Podcast Network. I am now streaming there as well. If you guys have Roku, that's where they have their channel. It's going to be a network of podcasters who stream live. So very cool. Thank you guys for also watching me on Patriot Podcast Network. Appreciate you guys. Cool. All right. So yeah, back to the border coverage. Things are still happening. I saw one night, it was cold one night. It was about for a Texan, it's cold. Okay. So you northern people are probably going to say I'm a weenie, but it was like 52 degrees. I know, but still with the wind chill, like, come on, it's cold. And there were still migrants crossing over the Rio, and it was pretty chilly that night. Some migrants came from Cuba on the first wave, and then there was some other activity that we were surveying over the border. Of course, this is like right by Eagle Pass and Piedras Negras, where it's like right near the port or the international pass. And so you can just see like cartel just kind of like watching for activity over on our side. And that's pretty much it. Had the National Guard out there, the Border Patrol doing their jobs. God bless them, because they are so under-resourced right now. But yes, that is definitely happening still. And unfortunately, because our headlines, they kind of just disappear on everything else. That's unfortunate. But anyway, let's get to some of this news. Let's catch up. Let's play some catch up here. I saw that all of a sudden we're able to talk about the laboratories over in Ukraine. Now, there's certain eggshells that we have to walk around when we talk about this story still, because as you guys know, that's just the way the media is set up right now, and the fact checkers and the policing going on in the internet. But yes, it looks to be that we are actually able to talk about this now because they're forced to. Jen Psaki had to actually address this in a press conference recently, and the narrative is already being manipulated. You guys hear it. Originally, this came from about 2 weeks ago when actually it's been 3 weeks now. We're probably well into 3 weeks with the conflicts between Russia, Ukraine, and the rest. The DS, you know what I mean? You know what DS stands for? So there was a Twitter account that actually published this first. It was by this account right here. It got suspended, the War Clandestine. And they shared this, we're going to call it an idea, an observation of, basically he was like, hey, look, when I put these two maps together of the laboratories and the airstrikes, the very strategic airstrikes done by Russia, it just looks a little aligned. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. It just looks a little bit aligned. And ever since, you guys know it, you can already call it, the media was at their throat. Anybody who reposted this, they got this fact checking information on their posts. They said that, oh, this is misleading information, all these things. So now they're trying to manipulate the narrative because now they have to address it because it is actually coming out. I'm going to share some clips. So I found, and I translated that. This, you guys can see this top toolbar here where it says translated to English. This is a Croatian fact checking site called factograph.hr. And it's really funny because I guess I didn't give too much thought to it. I guess I don't know why I thought that the fact checking systems were only in the United States, but this is where I learned, oh, this is happening in other countries. This is happening in other countries. So this is a Croatian fact checking site. And they're basically debunking the whole laboratory theory, right? So they're coming here, they're basically going through, they're saying Russia, 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 they're just propagandizing this whole situation. They're lying, don't believe them. It's old misinformation. There's even reports that, that this has been propagandized by the Russians it dates back to 2015. But this is where they try to debunk the whole bioweapons area. So they're saying, at first, the narrative was there's no biolabs in Ukraine. That's a conspiracy theory. And then it was really, really quickly forced upon them and pressured that they had to address it. Well, there are biolabs, but it's not the weapons stuff. We're researching health stuff. We're bettering the public. So here in this fact checking site, it says, in addition, there is no concrete evidence to confirm that the United States runs laboratories for the development of biological weapons in Ukraine, although Russia is increasingly making such accusations. The latter relate to claims by Russian authorities that they have evidence that Ukraine's health ministry ordered the destruction of plague, cholera, and other pathogens before the invasion began. Maria Zakharova, a spokeswoman for the Russia's foreign ministry, said this week. So then this is what's really funny about this fact checking site. Well, I guess it's funny with any fact checking site. And here's the thing. This is why I'm starting off with the fact checking article, because what you don't realize is they really tell a lot more about themselves than they actually realize. So what they do is, if you have ever looked at one of these, in the body of it, they'll say, this is what the claim is, well, this part and this part and this part. And it's kind of like, oh, okay. So, and then they'll take a little bitty granular detail and they'll say, but this part right here is what makes this entire thing not true. So if they extrapolate that minor detail and then they either give there are some other explanations to that detail, not necessarily by what the entire conflated claim is, then the whole thing is untrue because we say so. But anyway, so what's actually funny, what I was going to say is that they actually cite, you're going to see this again in another fact-checking article, they actually cite other fact-checking articles or fact-checking platforms for their sources. So here they're saying myth detector. We're going to actually see that right here. A fact-checking portal, Roskrin Cavendish, and they also swear American fact-checking sources, PolitiFact, Snopes. And they say here, evidence for claims of biological weapons is the Joint Threat Reduction Program launched by the U.S. Department of Defense in 1991. So then we go into this next one here, this other fact-checking. This is in the country of Georgia, not the state, Georgia. So this is a Georgian fact-checking site. Are there Pentagon-controlled biological laboratories in Ukraine? Well, pump your brakes, fact-checking site. What? Pentagon-controlled now? I mean, you're giving off a lot more than you think. So Pentagon, of course, they're going to go into, no, of course not. This is all Russian propaganda. And actually, okay, this is translated. You guys see here the screenshot. is one of the Russian, I guess, state media that actually portrayed this theory back in 2015 that, hey, in Ukraine there are some labs in there that are backed by the U.S. and they've been dangling this ever since. And of course, what do we see these big conglomerate media companies and fact-checking sites? What do? Oh, misinformation, Russian agents, how dare you, these types of things. You're going to see this rhetoric pop up again. It says that similar disinformation appeared on Georgian social networks following Russia's full-scale military attack on Ukraine. And then they talk about how it's been circulating not just through that war clandestine account, but apparently there are other foreign accounts that are Russian that are also saying the same things. Now let's take a look at this. This is actually funny. The claim that there are Pentagon-controlled biological laboratories in Ukraine is disinformation that has been disseminated by the Kremlin media and other pro-Russian sources for years. In fact, the U.S. Department of Defense has been assisting the Ukrainian government in technically strengthening its public health laboratory since 2005. However, the program does not include work on military biological projects. Oh, is that so? So let's just dissect this a little bit. This is where I can foresee that if you are portraying any sort of truth on what might be uncovered by the Russians, whether or not you stand with Russia or Ukraine, the truth is the truth. And if they're saying, and listen, like there have been Russian officials at the UN testifying this, like there are things that are going on in these things, you know, in Ukraine that could be potentially cleansing of certain minority groups or certain ethnic groups, and they're stating this out to the world, right? So by saying this stuff is just disseminated by the Kremlin media, you pro-Russian media sources, if you are even standing on any grain of truth coming from Russia, they're automatically, for what I can foresee, going to call you Russian bots, Russian agents, Russian provocateurs. I can already foresee it. And then it says, in fact, the U.S. Department of Defense has been assisting the Ukrainian government in technically, they should actually put that in quotes, technically strengthening its public laboratory since 2005. However, the program does not include work on military biological projects. Now, this account that got shut down by Twitter, you guys probably recognize the name here. But this is the account that actually started all of this. You guys have seen this circulate around social media. I think I may be onto something about Ukraine. You know, then they're talking about Zelensky and the Russians are firing at military installations. How broad is that term? I've seen speculation that it could include U.S. installed, you know what? At first I was like, no way. Then I started digging. Now, they suspended this account. And I don't know about you, but when you have ever gotten yourself nuked on social media, whether it be from Twitter, you know, Instagram, the only thing that I have ever gotten is this like very generic notice saying, you have violated community standards. You have violated the terms of service or something like that. And they never give a specific notice as to how you did that. Like, oh, you violated this by doing this, or because you're bullying and harassing or anything like that. It's just very generic. And they do that by tactic because they can always defer a suspension of an account to something generic like that. Now, again, this is coming from a Croatian site. I'm sorry, not Croatian, Georgian. This is coming from a Georgian site. Now, I don't know what information they have or how they have this information, but they are saying, and again, this is a fact-checking site, right? So you guys should be the beacons of truth. They're saying this account has been shut down due to the spread of disinformation. I think that's one of the most honest, put out explanations to why everybody gets nuked because of their definition of disinformation. So because by their definition of disinformation, this account got suspended. I think that's quite honest. They actually told the truth. You know, like I said, we only get generic notices. So anyway, I wanted to point that out because I just feel like they have more information and sourcing to why this got discontinued. All right. But carrying on. So they're basically saying that, you know, these are not bioweapons labs, you sillies. This isn't a bioweapons lab. We're strengthening the public sector. Russian sources and linked social media users have been targeting the Joint Threat Reduction Program launched by the United States Department of Defense in 1991 to safely neutralize biological weapons made in the post-Soviet countries and promote public health. The United States has been cooperating with Ukraine since 2005 under this program. Under the agreement, which entered the force in 2005, Ukrainian laboratories in various regions of Ukraine were technically upgraded. Notice that. I mean, these things technically upgraded. These things need little air bunnies. Technically upgraded and brought up to modern standards. However, this does not mean that these laboratories are for military purposes or subject to U.S. government. Andy Weber, a member of the board of directors and the American Arms Control Association and former assistant secretary for nuclear, biological, and chemical defense programs, explains to the fact-checking platform PolitiFact that the U.S. Department of State only helps Ukraine in context of improving public health. Weber stated that the claim of the Pentagon or any other U.S. government agency operates military laboratories in Ukraine is false. Now, there was a recent Senate hearing held by, well, this particular testimony was held by Marco Rubio. I just want to point some things out, okay? I just want to point some things out. Let's take a look at this. This is Victoria Nuland. She is a Biden official, an undersecretary. And he's asking her, are there, in fact, these things in Ukraine? Listen to what she has to say. Look at her body language.
He uses them to divide the opposition and demoralize them habitually, the way Putin has done as well. I only have a minute left. Let me ask you, does Ukraine have chemical or biological weapons?
Ukraine has biological research facilities, which, in fact, we are now quite concerned Russian.
You guys saw how she said, she goes, Ukraine has biological research facilities. I just want you guys to catch that body language. Let's do that again. Let's just do it again.
Research. Ukraine has biological research facilities, which, in fact, we are now quite concerned Russian forces may be seeking to gain control of. So we are working with the Ukrainians on how they can prevent any of those research materials from falling into the hands of Russian forces should they approach.
I'm sure you're aware that the Russian propaganda groups are already putting out there all kinds of information about how they...
Okay, wait. So, like, do you guys understand what she's saying? Do you guys understand what she's saying? So, first of all, this was Marco, and I'm gonna do something on Marco Rubio too, because I'm like kind of curious. I'm just wondering, okay? So he's asking her, Victoria Nuland, a Biden official, are there Ukrainian things going on in these facilities? You know what I mean? What's going on? And she's like, those are, but this is a biological research facility. Okay. We're doing research. Okay. We do research. That's what we're doing here. And Marco Rubio then kind of guides her into this questioning, like, oh, well, the Russians are going to get a hold of this, right? I'm like, wait a minute. Wait, how do we already become biased that the Russians are going to do that? Like, what source of information? I would like a source of information to believe that the Russians are doing that in order to get the biological I'm sorry, bioweapons to then use it against them. You know what I mean? So now this is the way that they are pushing this. Of yes, they do have this stuff, but we're worried that the Russians are going to get it and use it. So what are you researching then? What are you researching then? If it was only there to better the public health sector, right? Why would if the Russians were to investigate these facilities, why would they use something that would help the public health sector? Am I making sense to you? If there's nothing that would be harmful to the public in these facilities, then why are they worried about it in this respect? Does that make sense? Let's continue on.
They've uncovered a plot by the Ukrainians to release biological weapons in the country and with NATO's coordination. If there's a biological or chemical weapon,
it continues.
An incident or attack inside of Ukraine, is there any doubt in your mind that 100% it would be the Russians that would be behind it?
There is no doubt in my mind, Senator, and it is classic Russian technique to blame on the other guy what they're planning to do themselves.
Last question. I am certain that the Russians were looking at their their reserves as a way to buffer sanctions. Do you know how, now that we've sanctioned the central bank along with others, do we have an idea what percentage of their reserves are frozen or inaccessible to them?
Okay, so we're going to actually stop it there, but okay, let's just take it back a little bit.
Last question. I am certain that the Russians were looking at their reserves as to release.
Gain control of. So we are working with the Ukrainians on how they could materials.
Russian propaganda groups are already putting out there all kinds of information about how they've uncovered a plot by the Ukrainians to release biological weapons in the country and with NATO's coordination. If there's a biological or chemical weapon, an incident or attack inside of Ukraine, is there any doubt in your mind that 100% it would be the Russians that would be behind it?
There is no doubt in my mind, Senator, and it is classic Russian technique to blame on the other guy what they're planning to do themselves.
Okay, you see how Marco Rubio just kind of like zooms past that? Like, the thing I want to know is why he didn't follow up with that. That's a pretty bombastic claim. There's no doubt in my mind that the Russians are going to use this against the Ukrainians. You know, if they gain access to the whatever it is. Which, by the way, again, I'm just reiterating my point. If you guys are just researching health things, and bettering the public health sector, why would you be concerned that they would get access to this? And then secondly, like I mentioned, Marco Rubio just zooms past that, like moves very quickly away and doesn't follow up with that. He just moves really, really quickly away. Oh, okay, thanks. Next question about the finances and the seizing of freezing their assets and all that. The central bank has been, you know what I mean? Like, this is very questionable, if that makes any sense. Ken Motes says, last count I heard was allegedly 30 labs. Wow. Yeah, man. I don't know. That was just, this was very questionable. Her body language, everything that's very telling on his questions, but also Marco Rubio. That's the most curious thing to me. Why is he just moving on so quickly? Why does he just, he makes the question and it's as if he wants to get away from it, but I don't know. I don't know how they work. Maybe he does know. Maybe he's just trying to get that little piece out of her. But I don't know. That seems fishy. All right, so let's catch up on some trafficking news since I've been gone. There have been some quite significant things happening. For instance, let me just throw my brand up there and transition us. So this is the Daily Traffic, where I bring you guys the latest in human and sex trafficking news. All right. So Texas border, this is sourced from Breitbart. A Texas border city woman is accused of running underage sex trafficking operation for 23 years. This is just exemplary, exemplifies what's going on at the border and why it needs to be covered, because appended onto the already domestic problem that we have here in the United States, when we bring in people from other countries, we can't even fulfill the needs that we have here. I'm talking about, like, I'm starting to learn a lot more about the foster care system and how it's fractured in my ongoing research with Counter Trafficking Alliance, my organization. It is very appalling that I learned that children from the CPS Care System, there are so little resources and places to put these kids that sometimes these caseworkers that are working on their case, like they get taken from their mom and dad, for whatever situation, very abrupt, and there's nowhere to put them. So sometimes they just lay out mats in the caseworker's office at CPS, and the kid has to sleep there or something. Like, it's bad. It's bad. So I say all of that just to reiterate that I want you guys to understand the magnitude of our problem, because there is a domestic problem here where we don't have enough spaces for CPS children, for foster children, and then sex traffic survivors domestically in our country. And then this is happening where people are being trafficked into our country. A Texas woman and her son are facing federal charges in connection with the large-scale sex trafficking operation, which allegedly ran for longer than 23 years. The victims were reportedly young women and underage girls from northern Mexico. This week, Rita Martinez went before U.S. Magistrate Judge Nadia Medrano, who notified her of the former charges and ordered she be held without bond. Court documents revealed Martinez's son, Genaro Fuentes, is expected to make his appearance later this week. The charges against Miss Martinez and her son stem from an 11-count federal indictment a grand jury handed down last month under seal. Both mother and son were already in state custody on local charges. According to the indictment, Martinez would allegedly recruit women and underage, just girls. It's not underage, they're just girls. Women and girls in the Mexican states of Durango and Coahuila, promising jobs in the United States restaurants or maid service companies. The woman would then allegedly make arrangements with human smugglers to cross the victims into South Texas. All human smuggling activities in the Rio Grande Valley are controlled by the Gulf Cartel. Once the women arrived in Mission, Texas, Martinez would allegedly force them to work at a bar. And in other words, these are called cantinas, and I'll talk a little bit about that, to pay off smuggling debts. And the indictment revealed the women would work at Martinez's bar by drinking beers with patrons. Oh, yes. Court documents show that for each beer a client drank or bought for them, they would get a certain amount deducted from their debts. Okay, so let's discuss this little piece right here, because it goes really, really fast. But because this is actually where I got my start in combating trafficking or just volunteering in that respect, this is the exact place that I used to volunteer in ministries in outreach. So for those of you that don't know, I started out with ministries to outreach to sex workers from foreign countries that were trafficked into the United States. More specifically, this ministry is in Houston, Texas, where I am from. And in Houston, Texas, just to give you guys an idea of what this is, in Houston, Texas, on the port, the channel, there are cantinas, there are bars, but in Spanish, they're called cantinas. And what happens there is they concurrently act as a bar and a brothel. And this is happening to this day. That's what's crazy. What happens is these boat workers, they get off the ship from their latest cargo, and they will then look out for their entertainment. And so they will go to cantinas and they will drink and then hire the sex workers for sex. Now, I want to talk about the debt. this is the way that smugglers do this. They will do exactly what it says here. They trick them into work. Oh, come to the United States. I've got a job lined up for you. I've got clients. They need you. They'll pay you $20 an hour in the United States. They'll say something like this. And the women, the girls, they will agree to it and they will get smuggled here. And the trick is, and this is a scheme, it happens all over the world, but especially down at the border or, transporting to the border. They give their price, and this is even for people who want to just cross in. They'll give their price. It's going to cost this amount of money. Let's just say it's going to cost $5,000, just to say that. It's going to cost $5,000. Here is the package. You'll get smuggled into the United States, and voila, right? So they pay their $5,000. Sometimes these Latin American or whoever is coming into the country. I mean, it could be from Haiti, anybody. Sometimes they spend their life savings just to do this, and then with that to say that they have no more money to come into the United States. They're basically coming in here with everything that they have. And then what happens is the smugglers, they're called coyotes in Spanish. What they'll do is they'll bring them into the United States. And then they're in, right, with their car, with their product, and they'll say, "Hey, I said $5,000, but that was actually in you paid me in pesos. So here in the United States, $5,000 in pesos is not a lot. So you need to pay me the rest of the debt. That was $5,000. The $5,000 mark is what I charge in US dollars. So now pay up." So with what I explained, they already have, they have already given up their life savings. They have nothing else. And so the cartel or the smuggler will say, okay, well, you have nothing else and you have to pay off your debt. And so that's where they force them into the slavery, whether it's labor or sexual. And this is what happens. So this example right here is talking about cantinas. So then the girls or the women, and I've seen a girl in a cantina before. She looked about 11 years old, and she was in Houston, called the police. They could never recover her. That's what's scary about this whole thing. A little bit more about the cantinas. The beers, it mentions here that the beers with patrons, these are simultaneously also, they work as transactional tickets. So it's as if the John, and if you guys don't know what a John is, it's a client paying for the sexual transaction. The John will go in there and they will buy a beer, and by code that will mean at certain cantinas, but most cantinas that actually do this, the beer is basically a ticket for the girl. And so that's how it's directly relational to this. The women would work at Martinez Bar by drinking beers with patrons. Court documents show that for each beer a client drank or bought for them, they would get a certain amount deducted from their debts. So that's how it works. It works simultaneously as tickets for the Johns to buy the girl. And then apparently for the girl, they're being told that if they sell enough beers, they will get their debts reducted. But I will tell you that is a very rare case where the girls actually get freed or their debts ever get paid with anything that they do. Prosecutors claim Martinez and her son would force the women to have sex with customers for profit. The customers would take the women to hotels or vehicles for encounters. Authorities also claimed Martinez would physically abuse the women who refused to have sex and warned to turn them over to immigration authorities or threaten the safety of their families in Mexico. Clear tactic, always done over and over again. So yes, that is how cantinas work on the border, in major cities. I mean, they get trafficked in here, and they get taken to major cities for cantinas. That's just the way it works. Also, okay, so I actually did a piece on this on my main channel, youtube.com/NatalieDenise. We talked about the Refuge recently being busted for re-exploiting foster girls. If you guys want details on that, please go watch that video. It is important. I'm actually about to film a video right after this about another organization that was re-exploiting people. I can't believe this is a streak, but it's there. But let's talk about the Refuge a little bit. The Refuge is a safe house here in Texas. It's more near Austin, Texas. And what was happening was I think that this was a complete failure of protocol and vetting and background checking, as this should be the first priority with any staffer that volunteers or works for a safe house in any respect, because they're dealing with abused, neglected, and exploited children. You can't just have anybody just working in that house. I don't understand how that happened. So moving forward, basically the staff of this house, here it's kind of complicated because there's two sides. The Refuge, the leadership is saying it was only two girls that were exploited, and then there's a DFPS report that's saying that 7 girls were exploited. So there's some combating words or a war on words there. That's still developing. We'll have to see what the court documents reveal, hopefully in the next coming days. But the problem with this was that some of these staffers, some of them didn't even have background checks active. Some of them had previous criminal records, previous convictions, previous restrictions. One even was not allowed to be around children or a group of children. And yet there he was, or she was, in a group of children. It's crazy. It's crazy. So with that being said, they were exploiting the girls. I think the guy who got arrested, they haven't revealed his name yet. But he actually took child sexual exploitation material. He made it from 2 of the surviving girls in that shelter or that safe house. He sold the photos, the nude photos, and he bought drugs and alcohol with that money and gave some of that drugs and alcohol to the girls in the safe house. This story is honestly, like, it's very disappointing, and I'll tell you why. Because there's already a lack of housing in the United States, let alone the whole world. But in the United States, that's what I track because that's where I reside. But there's not a lot of safe houses already as it is. And the safe houses that do exist, they get underfunded. They need a lot more money than what they're given by the state or by the government. And what's really crazy is that these governments, they give out grants that are like hundreds of millions of dollars. We don't know where this is going to or why this isn't going to needful causes like this. But what I was trying to say is that this is highly disappointing because, number one, I really thought that this was one of the beacons of hope in the United States because their finances check out. I've heard a lot of great things about it, but that's again the most disappointing factor, that you can hear all these great things, you can check out all their finances, which is something that I keep my eye on, and then this pops off, and it's like, how in the world do you keep these places accountable? The safest place that you should encounter after getting taken out of that life ends up being the place where you're being re-exploited. It's wild. We're living in the Wild West where, this is a part where we need to navigate a solution to. It's just really complicated. But yeah, that's what's been going on at the Refuge. Again, very, very disappointing. I just couldn't believe my ears. All right, coming to the next story here. This is from justice.gov. Former Beaverton mayor Yes, that's right. You heard me right. A mayor. Beaverton mayor charged with possession of child sexual exploitation material. Denny Doyle, a former mayor of Beaverton, Oregon, is facing federal charges for illegally possessing child sexual exploitation material. Doyle, 73, a Beaverton resident, has been charged with criminal information on one count of possession of child sexual exploitation material. According to the information between November 2014 and December 2015, Doyle is alleged to have knowingly and unlawfully possessed digital material containing child sexual exploitation material, including images depicting children under 12. Doyle will make his first appearance in federal court today. If convicted, Doyle faces a maximum sentence of 20 years in federal prison, a $250,000 fine, and a life term of supervised release. U.S. Attorney Scott Eric Asfog of the District of Oregon had made the announcement. This case is being investigated by FBI Portland's Child Exploitation Task Force and is being prosecuted by the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Oregon. A criminal information is only an accusation of a crime, and the defendant is presumed innocent unless proven guilty. Crazy times, guys. Okay. With that being said, this has been very heavy. I thank you guys so much for tuning in to the podcast. These minutes always fly by so quickly. I'll be back tomorrow. I don't have any abrupt trips that I know about, so I will be here with you guys. So tomorrow I'll be back with another episode with Nightly with Natalie, the daily traffic, giving you guys the latest headlines and the latest trafficking news. I appreciate you all. Thanks so much for watching. I will catch you guys in the next episode. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Unravel with Natalie Denise. Please give this podcast 5 stars.